Hey guys, and welcome to the 31st episode of Death Row Executions. For today's story, we have Scotty Garnell Morrow, who was executed last year on May 2nd, 2019 for killing 2 people. At the time of his execution, he was the first in the state of Georgia that year. Scotty Morrow was born on March 2nd, 1967. Both of his parents were together when he was born, but life was far from perfect. His father abused his mother, and Scotty could recount one incident that occurred when he was a toddler and his dad stomped on his mother's stomach so hard in a fit of rage. His mother was pregnant at the time, and because of the trauma to that area, she experienced a miscarriage. Scotty's mother was eventually able to escape and ended up moving into a relative's home. Life was better for his mother, but not for Scotty. By age 7, he was being raped by that relative and soon started to get raped by a second family member. He kept things to himself, but his mother unknowingly saved Scotty from the sexual abuse by saving enough money to move into a new place in New York, which was in a completely different state. She eventually found a new boyfriend, but he too was abusive with her, and Scotty witnessed the same abuse his father dealt to her. Scotty grew up feeling inadequate as a man and had a hard time not copying what he witnessed every man do to his mother. He dropped out of school in 10th grade and eventually made his way to the state of Georgia, where he started his new life on his own. By the age of 27, Scotty was already divorced and had 2 sons with his ex-wife, whom he was still living with, and began dating a new woman by the name of Barbara Ann Young in June 1994. Barbara was around the same age and had 5 kids of her own. She was also very studious and was attending linear tech. The relationship was fine at first, but Scotty became abusive with Barbara and she gained enough strength to tell him she no longer wanted a relationship with him. The last straw for Barbara was on December 9th, 1994. Scotty was supposed to take Barbara to school, but instead drove her to a completely different county and raped her. After that act, Scotty drove to a convenience store and went inside. This gave Barbara enough time to run to a payphone where she called one of her instructors, who later testified that Barbara said, "Help me, call the police, he's got me." For whatever reason, charges were not filed, and Scotty eventually dropped Barbara off at her house. After 6 months of dating, Barbara broke things off with Scotty mid-December and was able to spend Christmas alone with her children. Scotty had called Barbara multiple times after their split, but she was firm in keeping her distance. On December 29th, a few days after Christmas, Scotty called Barbara on her home phone close to 10 o'clock in the morning. Barbara answered and stated that she wanted nothing to do with him and to leave her alone. The call lasted for 9 minutes before Barbara hung up. Angered by her not wanting to get back with him, Scotty grabbed his 9mm pistol and drove to Barbara's house. Barbara, unaware of how angered Scotty was, continued her morning socializing with her 2 friends, Tonya Horn and Tonya Woods, along with her 2 little children. When Scotty arrived at Barbara's house, he broke in and saw all 3 females in the kitchen talking and enjoying each other's company. When Barbara noticed Scotty in the house, the 2 began to argue. Barbara's friend Tonya Woods told Scotty to leave and said that her friend wanted nothing to do with him. After hearing that, he yelled, "Shut your mouth," pulled out his pistol from his waistband and shot Tonya once in the abdomen, and then aimed the gun at Tonya Horn and shot her once in the arm. The bullet that hit Tonya hit her spinal cord and caused her to become paralyzed from the waist down, so she was unable to move. Tonya and Tonya stayed in the kitchen while Barbara ran away to her bedroom down the hall. Her son was in a separate room hiding, but was able to see his mom from his hiding place. Scotty made it to Barbara's bedroom and began to beat her, focusing only on her head and face. Badly beaten, Barbara was able to escape and ran out of her bedroom down the hallway, but Scotty caught her by grabbing her hair and then immediately shot her in the head at point-blank range. Barbara fell to the floor, dying instantly, and her son witnessed the whole thing but managed to stay quiet. After killing Barbara, Scotty went back into the kitchen where her friends were still badly injured. His gun jammed, and either he cleared his jam or reloaded the gun because there were live rounds on the ground, and Tonya heard the gun clicking. After fixing his jam, he placed the gun under Tonya's chin and fired, killing her instantly. He then went to Tonya and shot her 2 more times in the face and arm. Scotty then cut the telephone lines and left the scene of the crime. The shot that hit LaToya in the face shattered the palate of her mouth, and she became deaf in one ear. The shot in her arm left her with permanent nerve damage as well, but she thankfully survived, and when Scotty left, she mustered up enough strength to go to a neighbor's house by the name of Christopher, who phoned the police. When police arrived on the scene, LaToya was able to let responding officers know who committed the crimes, and they immediately went to Scotty's house, who was there and was arrested on site. The pistol used for the murders was found in his backyard, and he confessed everything while being questioned. It was later noted by Scotty's ex-wife that when he made it to his house, he was contemplating committing suicide, and the only thing that stopped him was his son calling out for him. On March 6, 1995, Scotty was charged with 2 counts of malice and felony murder, 6 counts of aggravated assault, aggravated battery, burglary, possession of a firearm while being a felon, and cruelty to a child. The state Supreme Court sought to seek the death penalty on May 1, 1995. The actual trial did not start until June 29, 1999, in Hall County, Georgia, and lasted up until June 29, 1995. The jury found Scotty guilty, but did not specify the recommendation of death or not, so the trial court took the conviction of both murders and sentenced him to death. He was initially sentenced to die by method of electrocution, but that sentence changed to lethal injection. While on death row and filing his many appeals, he claimed he was a changed man and said the murders were only because he had deep love for Barbara and her family and could not deal with the fact he could not rescue their relationship. In 2011, Scotty's sentence was actually overturned because a judge ruled that his lawyer had not provided the best representation. A new trial was ordered by this judge, but the Georgia Supreme Court overruled that decision and reinstated his original death sentence. After 25 years on death row, it was time for Scotty's execution day, which was on May 2, 2019. Before his death, Scotty was visited by 10 family members, a friend, and his attorneys. His son said that he was a positive influence in his grandchildren's lives. For Scotty's last meal, he had a large lemonade, 2 all-beef franks, a bag of buttered popcorn, a pint of butter pecan ice cream, 2 chicken and waffle meals, and a hamburger with mayonnaise. While he was eating his last meal, he was told that the U.S. Supreme Court made their final ruling and no other appeals could be made. After this news, Scotty stopped eating, and guards later said that he only finished half of his meal. After being strapped in, he said his final words, "I would like to give my deepest, sincerest apology to the Woods family and to the Young family. I love you all. God bless." He also spoke to the witnesses in the execution chamber and said, "I hope you all recover and have healing." Prison warden Benjamin Ford gave a signal for the execution to begin. The drug started to run through his body at around 9:26 p.m. 2 minutes later, witnesses noticed his chest heaving, he tilted his head, and then let out a yawn. After he yawned, his body was still, and by 9:37, 2 doctors came in the room and pronounced him dead at 9:38 in the evening. He was 52 years old and became the first man executed in Georgia in 2019. After Scotty's death, District Attorney Lee Dara, who was actually a prosecutor during the trial, made this statement. "Tonight, the death penalty that I had asked a jury to impose 20 years ago finally was carried out in the execution of Scotty Morrow. It was truly a profound thing to witness, but it was important that I be present. Justice was done for the families of Tonya Woods and Barbara Ann Young, for whom I wish peace and comfort." Thank you guys for watching, and now I would like to show some appreciation to Paul, Colleen, Donna, and Jennifer. 4 new patrons on my Patreon. Thank you guys so much for your support and for believing in the channel. Now for discussion and question time. Do you think stalkers like Scotty suffer from something similar to people who have obsessive-compulsive disorder? People with OCD make statements about not being able to control their thoughts. It seems like restraining orders do not work with violent stalkers, and they obsess until they can move on to someone else. Do you think if someone has a history of stalking, they should be in mandatory therapy? It seems like nothing is ever done to take precaution, and the victim is left feeling scared and always looking over his or her shoulder. I found out after I was done with this story that Scotty and Barbara lived in different counties, and the police from Barbara's county phoned the police department in Scotty's area and spoke with his sister, who was a deputy sheriff. These are two siblings who grew up to be completely different. Who knows, maybe being raped by two relatives affected him, and maybe she was never sexually abused. Do any of you have siblings who were raised by the same parents and had the same upbringing, but you guys turned out to be extremely polar opposites in terms of good versus bad? Or any parents who have experienced this with their children? I once watched a documentary where a man talks about his younger brother who was always in and out of prison. He never understood why his brother was so different and could not stay on the right track. It wasn't until he was well into his 60s that he realized one day that he and his brother were 11 years apart, and he grew up with his mom and dad, and his dad took care of the home, took care of him, and instilled in him great values. His father passed away while his mother was pregnant with his brother, so his brother grew up without a father, a struggling mother who was absent a lot due to work, and he realized that even though they had the same parents, they grew up completely different. He didn't excuse his brother's behavior, but he was able to understand his younger brother a little bit more.